Ever since I was 15 years old, color guard has shaped my life. Hi, my name is Devin, and for the past 17 years, color guard has been much more than just a hobby for me. It's been a place where I found confidence, identity, discipline, and purpose. It's how I made sense of the world. Color guard has given me an outlet to create and goals to pursue in a multitude of ways. So I wanted to share a little bit about my story and what my next plans are in my journey. When I first started in 2008 as a sophomore in high school, I was not athletic. I was extremely shy, quiet, insecure, and wasn't physically capable of doing the things I saw other performers doing around me. But I continued to try and not give up. I loved performing, and I thought that with enough hard work, I'd be able to achieve what I wanted. Eventually, after close to 10 years as a performer, I discovered something that changed everything for me. When I started treating color guard like a real sport and had access to train for it intentionally in the gym and outside of rehearsal, my performance capabilities completely changed. I became stronger, more confident, and I realized there were so many performers that were struggling the same way I did. They also didn't have access to the fitness guidance they needed to be successful in color guard. That's why I created Spin Strong. My goal with Spin Strong is to help performers and instructors approach color guard training differently than we have the last 50 years. Through experience and education-based fitness, strength training, mobility work, injury prevention, and sustainable performance strategies that actually support what we do from people who've done it before. So far, we've helped lots of people approach their training in a better, more informed way, and it makes my heart happy to see those who've been able to achieve more because of what we've offered. But this summer, I want to take that one step further. At Spin Strong, I don't want to just talk about the training process to get better at color guard. I want to live it with you. I want performers to see how my advice can help them achieve their goals and be living proof that with the right knowledge and practices, you can accomplish anything. So over the next 4 months, I'm putting myself through the same challenge so many performers dream about. And so many adults think that they're too old to try again. At 33 years old, I will be auditioning for an independent world guard for the 2027 WGI season. And this series is going to document every part of that journey. The training, the setbacks, the conditioning, the mental battles, the progress, and what it really takes to chase the goal of being a world-class performer. So whether you're brand new to this activity or if you've been in it longer than me, welcome. I'm glad you can join me. A bit of my background, the short version. I'm originally from Pembroke Pines, Florida, where I started color guard in high school as a sophomore. I was a part of the West Broward Color Guard for all 3 years I was there. I was on the JV Winter Guard team as a sophomore and as a junior, and finally made the varsity guard my senior year, where we got second in Scholastic Open at WGI. So kind of a big deal. Though, I hate to admit it, I did not realize at the time how awesome that was, or how that would shape the expectations I'd place on myself when I continue to do color guard after graduating. After high school, I marched with Braddock Independent World for 5 seasons, while I was getting my degree in communication arts at FIU. I did get to perform with the marching band at FIU for a few years, which was fun and was where I met a bunch of lifelong friends. But once I was done with school, I wanted to pursue 1 more year performing in WGI finals. So me and my friend Blake moved to Atlanta and marched Paramount World back in 2017. It was amazing and I loved every second of it, and it really opened my eyes to a new landscape of what a career in color guard was and what being a world-class performer really consisted of. Unfortunately, as was the agreement I made with my parents as a girl with no job and no money, I moved back home after that season was over. And that was harder than I thought it'd be. I was glad to be back with my friends and getting to teach now, but I had a really hard time finding a job as a postgraduate and also had a lot of difficulties while teaching guard in South Florida as well. After some extreme heartbreak, I took that as a sign that I was meant to be back in Georgia. So I moved to Atlanta again and marched Paramount again in 2019 and in 2020. And I would have been done after that season, but COVID happened. So I was able to march again in 2021 and finally in 2022 at my big age of 28. I was done and finally retired and ready to move on to being on the other side of the activity. Now, all of that might sound really inspiring and successful, and in many ways it was. I've had incredible experiences as a performer in this activity. I performed in amazing productions, traveled, taught students I cared deeply about, met lifelong friends, and gotten opportunities I never could have imagined when I first started. But alongside all of those highs, there's a lot of lows that I don't talk about often. The truth is, I was a very late bloomer, in life and in color guard. And not in the cute, oh, she just needs an extra season kind of way. I mean years behind, where a lot of my peers seem to be naturally after such a short bit of time in the activity. You know how some performers just click with it really early on? They understand movement quality, performance, equipment control, confidence. They just look comfortable in their body and on the floor. That wasn't my experience at all as a young performer. Even as a world-class veteran, when on paper I looked successful, I was still fighting through basics and strength issues that a lot of my peers had already moved past and continued without issue. I constantly felt like I was working just to keep up, not necessarily to stand out. I felt like I was drowning just trying to reach a baseline that seemed to come so much faster for other people. But I loved performing, so I stayed with it. I worked really hard, I tried to be coachable, dependable, and consistent. And over time I did improve, just not as fast as a lot of those around me did, and not with a lot of experience in more difficult tricks and choreography. It's not like I didn't work hard. I was often told I was the hardest worker in the room, but I struggled physically to get through everything, and no matter what I did outside of a rehearsal, it wasn't enough. Now, this was way before the internet and social media brought fitness education to exist the way it does now. Back when I was a young performer, most fitness content aimed at young women wasn't ever about athletic performance. It was just about being skinny and looking acceptable for others. I didn't have access to sports training the way a young adult like me needed. In order to become a stronger performer for my team, I was following Pinterest ab challenges and doing Blogilates videos in my bedroom and running all the time, because I genuinely thought that's what was going to help me accomplish all the goals I wanted to achieve. These methods weren't entirely wrong or bad, but they were not the kind of training I needed. I would also spin in my yard when I could, I would go to clinics every summer, and I would try to absorb as much information as I could from people around me. But it still felt like everyone else had access to some secret understanding of color guard that I didn't. Eventually, once I could finally afford a gym membership and had better access to fitness education, things started to shift. My approach still wasn't very good though. I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to work out, barely eating, barely recovering, and somehow still thinking I was performing at a world-class level. I genuinely thought a Slim Jim and a Mandarin Orange counted as a recovery snack. It's honestly shocking I didn't get seriously injured during those years. In a weird, universe-aligning way though, during COVID, I finally had the time to learn what my body actually needed. I started taking barre classes, then lifting weights, then learning about recovery, mobility, nutrition, and rest, and also learning how to not punish myself for not knowing what I didn't know. Suddenly, things that had felt impossible for years started working better. I remember being in a barre class thinking, I really wish I had this when I was younger. Eventually, that moment became Spin Strong. I wanted to build the kind of resource I desperately wish had existed when I was younger. Real guidance from a color guard performer, scientifically and professionally based education, and athletic support for performers who don't immediately click with the activity. With that, it's hard not to wonder, if I had access to this information earlier when I was still performing, would I have struggled less? Would I have been able to make all the weapon lines I auditioned for or gotten the solos I wished were mine? Would I have made all the teams I tried out for? Would I have been able to accomplish even more than what I already have? That's why I'm doing this series. Not so I can have the validation of marching again, and not so I can relive the past. I genuinely love my life now. But for the first time in my life, I genuinely feel like I could support myself as an athlete, not just survive. And if I'm going to ask other performers to trust my process here at Spin Strong, to train differently than maybe what they've been told in the past, or train differently than they already have been for years now, to try something new, to believe that they're capable of more even when progress seems slow, then I need to be willing to do it too. I want people to see this series and realize that the growth needed to reach the highest accolade in this activity is possible. No matter what background you come from, no matter how little experience you have, it doesn't mean you can't work hard or that you can't be successful. So whether you're auditioning for a guard or teaching students or just want to be a stronger performer, I hope you'll find something useful for you in this process and follow me along my journey. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to my story. I'll see you on the next update. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next video, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at spinstrong_official, where we can help you spin your strongest. Bye.